Between 1993 and 2003, New Line was trying to put a deal together to do a Freddy vs. Jason movie. One of the benefits of New Line acquiring the Jason character from Paramount. Because the fans really wanted it to happen, the studio kept us all waiting until no one really gave a rat's ass. Before they could greenlight the project, Sean Cunningham and his team greenlit another project, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why they decided to go with it. Didn't Leprechaun 4 and Critters 4 teach them anything? Aside from being one of the worst cliches ever to grace a horror franchise, Jason in space just doesn't sound like a good idea. I have to admit I was pretty skeptical about this. I was pretty sure it was an April Fool's joke. This is something you joke about when a movie has overstayed its welcome.
Plus, after the last one, what do you do? Like Jay and Bob in space. Someone said lunch. He thought he said launch.
But is the movie any good? Well, we're back to Jason as we know him. Thankfully, they ignored the jumping into other bodies storyline, so seeing him back in his hockey mask is a welcome surprise. The movie starts with him chained up at a research lab, where the military wants to keep him as a government weapon. Of course, Jason gets loose, and within the first 5 minutes, probably kills more people than he normally does in the span of an entire film. I have to say, the blood level is a little lacking, which is surprising given it was released in 2002. This was when horror movies started to up the graphic violence, so Jason X seems pretty tame. The heroine, a scientist named Rowan, is against Jason's preservation and in a daring escape attempts to freeze Jason in a cryogenic chamber. You would think this would work, but again the filmmakers defy the laws of physics, as Jason pierces through his iron prison with his rusty machete, trapping Rowan with him. We then shift about 400 years into the future, I'm being dead serious, where a science expedition from Earth 2 travels to Earth 1 and stumbles upon Jason.
What happened to Earth 1?
It's dead.
And like any smart research team, they bring the serial killer aboard. From here on out, the film is one big cross between Friday the 13th and Star Trek. I'm not kidding, and that's the most basic explanation I can give. They actually tried to make this a serious science fiction film. Using nanotechnology, they resuscitate Rowan, who attempts to start a new life aboard the ship.
Vital signs are normal and strong.
No shit.
In the meantime, the very act of two teenagers having sex awakens Jason from his slumber, where he goes on another infamous killing spree. Of course there's no stopping him as he kills off ship members one by one. A team of Marines, led by Sergeant Brodsky, goes after him, but of course that doesn't go too well. And after being blown to bits by the FBI in the last film, who'da thunk it? And then Jason goes after the remaining crew and the students. The film is actually pretty fast-paced, and as a science fiction film, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't entertaining. But again, there just doesn't seem to be any violence. Remember in the old days of the Paramount films, when they glorified the act of killing someone? In this one, Jason is more of a wrestler than a murderer, and I can't help but notice that there's an unusual amount of humor that abounds. It's not subtle like in Jason Lives, but rather relies on cheesy puns.
Guys! It's okay, he just wanted his machete back!
Look, KM, I don't think this is going to work. Why do you want those things, anyways?
Janessa has them.
Oh, this sucks on so many levels!
He's screwed.
Making it seem out of place and unnecessary. The film is okay until we get to the last act, where the android, again I'm not making this up, an android in the middle of a Friday the 13th film, KM, packing an assortment of futuristic weapons, goes medieval on his ass.
Afraid I'm gonna have to hurt you now.
Gotcha.
I really wish the film would have ended here, because what happens next defies the rules of a Jason film. After she not only lops off his limbs, but completely blows off his face, Jason lands in a resuscitation chamber, only to be transformed into Uber Jason. Even in the film's trailers, I knew this was going to be a train wreck of a film, and this is Jason we're talking about here. As Uber Jason, he's once again unstoppable, proving invincible even against the android's assault. Now this happens during the last 15 minutes of the movie, so thankfully we don't have to put up with it too long. But that's not even the weirdest part. The scene I think everyone remembers is when they trap Jason inside the holodeck. Yes, an honest-to-God holodeck like the one on the Enterprise in Star Trek The Next Generation. There, KM and Sunaran program a very nostalgic Crystal Lake, where Jason encounters who else? A couple of virtual campers.
Hey, you want a beer?
Or do you want to smoke some pot?
Or we can have premarital sex.
We love premarital sex!
It's actually a pretty touching scene, and even uses the original Harry Manfredini music from the original film. But I can't help feel just a little cheated. Because it's the new Uber Jason stomping around and not his original form, it just doesn't feel authentic. Of course they bring back the sleeping bag death, and the scene as a whole is pretty funny. Of course, Jason realizes he's being played a fool and gets back into the ship, where Sergeant Brodsky battles him in outer space, and everyone lives happily ever after. That is until he lands on the unsuspecting Earth 2. Honestly, the movie plays more like a graphic novel than a horror film, and if you look at it that way, it's not bad. The thing is, this is an installment in the Friday the 13th franchise, so it does sort of stick out like a sore thumb. The special effects are lame, the violence is really minimal, and while it is pretty exciting, it's not the least bit scary or suspenseful. It's not something you'd really watch in Halloween, but rather something you'd show at a comic convention. I feel funny just reviewing it for October. New Line once again opted to do something different with the character, and I have to admit, they came up with some pretty cool ideas. Seeing Jason hack away at a virtual alien is amusing to say the least, but it was almost as if the filmmakers were mocking Jason. You don't take a movie like this seriously. Being that the X in the title is actually the Roman numeral for the number 10, being that this is the 10th film in the series, it is a low point. But as a funny little science fiction movie, it kind of works, and again, they at least tried to come up with some cool ideas to take the franchise in. But they really need to put him back in the woods.
Okay, screw this, game over.